we, our 6-member family, came to Nantucket in 1945 and came across the island in our old 36 Chev to Wisconsin and unraveled our stuff. And among that was a bunch of watercolor things because I'd done some before, but I really wanted to do some here. So I had little oils too. But my background really was in drawing and in watercolor. There's a very early oil here that I did of Sanctity. My dad piled me into a 36 Chev and said, "George, you're going painting." And we went up to Sanctity and I worked on that, I think, most of the afternoon. My dad was an Episcopal minister who all of his life kind of wished he was an artist. Not overtly, but, you know. And one day he sat all 4 of us down. He says, "Yeah, you guys, you've been here 3 weeks. I can see you need to earn a little money. Now, my older brother, Moulton, Mo, you're a great babysitter. Why don't you be a babysitter? And Pete, you're pretty good with, I don't know, you help around and you clean up. Be a cleaner over. Now, George, go paint, okay? Go paint. I wish I were painting, but go paint. And just don't stop."
Well, what did your other brothers think of that? That sounds like they got the wrong end of the deal.
Well, yeah, they all made money. And what I did at the end, and I can remember the first time I did it, was very early in the Art Association, maybe 1946 or 7. I had a one-man show over in the Art Association in the little gallery. And my grandmother, who was kind of a matronly soul and black with curls, came in and sat right in the middle of the gallery and watched everyone go by. And she made note of who got what. And at the end of that show, she said, "Georgie," she called me Georgie, "Georgie, which ones did not sell?" And I said, "Well, this one and that one and this one and that one." She says, "Put a red dot on all of them, I want the rest." I said, "Grandma, that'll look like they all sold." "You got it." So I had a sellout show. It isn't like the competitive art world now with 50 galleries. There were only 2, and it was. They'd say, "Hey George, get your dad to bring you over on Sunday. We'll paint for 4 hours." So I come, we went and did it. And one time, I had 3 years later, I had an old World War II Jeep. It had bullet holes in it, and I drive that around, and I finally got Peter Carr, who ran the School of Art here, and a couple of other old kind of guys who did really well and did beautiful work. I said, "Look, come in the Jeep, I'm going to go out to Matticat, and we'll paint there." So we went out, we each had our little, I had some watercolors, and other people had oils and so forth. And we started out from the little town there, out towards the point, and there was a kind of a stretch of water. It must have been the creeks, I guess. And I didn't know how deep it was. So I just drove right out through it, and as we sank, I said, "Okay, everybody hold your watercolor stuff up, don't get it wet." So we did, and we walked ashore, and luckily Millie was there in Matticat, and she gave us all a ride home. But I had to sell that car because the engine block, which was very hot, had cracked, and I got $25 for it. I thought that was a lot. It burned the hell out of me because for 10 years I watched this guy drive my car around for $25, and I couldn't do it. So anyway, that's one of the little frustrating things.
So here you are, it's a 60-year retrospect, right?
Yes,
basically.
it is. Yeah.
When you look at your paintings today, when you look back at what you were painting, and do you paint outside, do you plein air, or?
Yeah, most of my stuff is done outside. Mm-hmm. I do some things in the studio when I have maybe a photograph or something I want to work with, but I prefer to be outside. Light is my thing, and you'll see that that's what obsesses me. And the best light, strongest light is outside.
Does it remind you when you look at your paintings today of how different things have become, or?
Oh yeah. Pat Gardner, a great painter who died a few years ago in the Art Association, used to paint the moors and paint off there. But one day she looked up and she says, "I can't go anywhere and not see a house. They're all big things are growing. I'm not going to paint out here anymore." So she stopped painting out there, and she did beautiful things, watercolors and etchings and things like that. But it did affect some people who were very sensitive to that. This was our little cottage on Potic Street in Sconset. And when we got it, the name was the house that Jack built. When my father, the minister, started calling it the pulpit. So even to this day, it's called the pulpit. There's a painting here that I love. I went to art school over in the Cape in one summer, and this kind of wash drawing is Wellfleet, and I really like it. That's in 1956, so I was 22, and that came out. So I've kept that, and here we are. I sail a little bit, and my friend had this schooner, and we sailed out into the America's Cup races. And this is the Vim over here on the white boat, a 12-meter. And I kind of like that. That's an oil, and I remember I thought that was pretty cool. Clint Andrews, who people who have been here knew and I think probably cared for, had this boat, the Winoma. And the Winoma, I'd gone out on many, many days, scalloping, but also he'd take me painting too. And near the end of his life, he died several years ago, George would come to my studio with scallops, a pound of scallops. We had a deal going. And he'd give me a pound of scallops, and I'd give him one of my prints. When he died, he had 11 of my prints around his bathtub. This is an oil on a panel. I didn't bother to frame it, which I did in a still life class at the museum school. And just to make it kind of authentic, and here's Brant Point I throw into it here. But that was an early thing. And I love realism. You can see how realistic the camera is done here. Okay. This is a pastel I did quite a bit, I think, in the 1980s of George Andrews' shack. This was the fellow I talked about. And it was always pretty chaotic, full of stuff in front of it. And he'd appear out of this door and come out and talk to you. And he was pretty amazing. That's been urban renewed now, and it's kind of pretty. But those are the times when it had all this junk and trash in it. It was full inside of nets and smelled of fish. This reminds me of George a bit, but it's not. This is a very recent oil I did. In someone's studio, invited me there, and he said, George, I'm giving you 2 hours and 2 brushes, a 1-inch and a 2-inch brush. You work too small, get big and bold. So in 2 hours, I just did this, and I like it a lot. It was a lesson in getting away from realism and getting into paint and expression. This is from our house, looking out in the winter across the creeks at Phil Murray's house. This is the Monomoy Beach, looking out towards town, towards the boatyard. And it's a pastel. I guess it was done probably around 2000, maybe or 1990s. I like it. It was done on a very dark piece of paper. See the black? That's the paper. I try to keep the paper color when I paint. So you're doing two things. You're looking at a realistic scene like you would perceive it, but also it's just, hey, that's nothing but paint and paper. And that, when you get both of those charges, it's really nice to have both things happening. I've really always loved the outside light, as I say, but I'd love just landscape and changing landscape with weather and time. Here is an oil that I did in the moors many years ago. I think that's probably in the 80s, perhaps. Above it is something that's almost comparable to it. There's a berry picker on the right, and that's on the edge of the moors in pastel. One thing here, see the orange? That's the paper. See the orange? That's the paper. That makes the blues brighter, that one. But it holds the whole thing together if you leave paper selectively on it. I like doing that. This is one I did. My friend Charlie Parsons is a retired doctor, but a member of the Art Association, and he had this cabin up in Vermont. And we went up for the weekend. We were there, and guys, there was no amenities. We cooked outside. We enjoyed the night and the flies. And in the morning, I got up and did this large piece of the cabin, which is back in the woods. One of my real loves and fascinations in life has been fishing. And when I had two boys, Nathaniel, who's the older fellow, and Jonathan, who's shown here, that was passed on to them, the fishing thing. And this is a stream near us, a great trout stream, in Marguerite, in the river valley, as is this. This dark one is Nathaniel fishing in a pool there, and that's on a black piece of paper, but I love the light in it. This on the left is one kind of like that, but this is on a trip to Newfoundland and fishing again. This is Jonathan fishing in a river there, And well, the last bit of painting I've done prior to the show is where I'm letting my hand get ahead of my brain and technical. This apparatus that happens when the eye and the brain coordinate with the hand, and boy, it's just right, and it's just detail, and it's really great. That's really nice in some things, but I wanted to get away from that and let it be calligraphic. So here's something up on Main Street. It's just, you know, lines and colors, and it's much freer. I guess I'm fighting to be a little freer occasionally in my work. And this, in the boat basin, is very much the same way. It took about an hour and a quarter, and I just went as fast as I could, and I find that it sometimes works. That's, again, all the paper is the gray, and then the rest is just kind of punctuated with color. This one is much more heavily punctuated, and this is really very close to Monet kind of impressionism. And this one is much like the others, except this has an emotional content, I find. And it's, again, it's at the same place that I've painted many of these things. But there's a kind of, I don't know, this kind of movement that is repeated. And to me, it has a kind of energy that the more stable, static things don't have. So here we are, 2009, and someone came up, I think Bobby Fraser, who, the very able gallery director here, came up with the idea, in fact, that indeed 60 years ago I was in a first show at the Artists Association. That makes me feel older, but also it makes me feel seasoned, you know, kind of experienced. But it was a very wonderful idea of the Arts Association to do this and make me pull everything together from pretty much all my life and review it and look at it. So we hope you get a chance to see it at the gallery.